My name is Professor Sime Curkovic. I've been a professor at Western Michigan University for 23 years now. I did all of my graduate and doctoral work at Michigan State University, and then for my undergrad, I basically majored in something similar to what you guys are majoring in. I did that at Kettering GMI University in Flint, Michigan. So, been in the field for decades, and most of my work experience has been in the auto industry. And I always like to joke, if you dig back long enough, I would say the auto industry in the state of Michigan invented supply chain management. So it was a good place to learn it and do it. And now it's taken off across the country and globally, especially with COVID. I mean, the government came out and said anything that has anything to do with supply chain management is going to be considered an essential service. So anytime you're majoring in something that the government says is an essential service, you're onto something already, because that implies that it's maybe pandemic proof, recessionary proof, which is always a good thing. So,
Yeah, for sure. Well, we have a few questions here. I don't know if you want to go first, Nick, or I can
Oh,
start.
you can shoot your first couple. Yeah.
Yeah, so I guess my first question is what got you started in supply chain? How did you find it? And
I discovered it during my work experiences at General Motors, and then just as an undergrad majoring in business, I stumbled across it. And what struck me about supply chain management was it's actually a very well rounded degree and education. You have to be a jack of all trades. So it appealed to me that it required that you be kind of good at a bunch of different things. And when I was in supply chain management decades ago, it was very tactical. And even though it was still very tactical, it was kind of still exciting to me. By tactical, I mean, my first job was making sure that stuff was at the right place at the right time in the right quantities at the right price. Very tactical stuff. My first job has been replaced by technology because technology can do all of that stuff, making sure stuff's at the right place at the right time in the right quantities at the right price. There's some technology like robotic process automation where if there are actually mistakes, the technology will fix and correct the mistakes for you. So uh, even back then, it was very, very tactical. But then over a period of time, supply chain management has become more strategic, which requires more soft skills and hard skills in making decisions that impact the company long term versus tactical. So the things that attracted me to the field were similar to what maybe you find appealing, but I think your career path right away is going to be a little more strategic, more so than tactical, which just means it's more exciting. But greater responsibility comes with that as well. But then again, better pay does, better job security, more advancement opportunities. You're going to be making decisions on do we make or buy? And then if we buy, who do we buy it from? And you have to think about that decision 5, 10, 15 years down the road and how it's going to impact your employer. Uh, those decisions were never made by a college grad back in my day. Those were for people that had years of experience, but now they're putting you into roles where you need legal skills, engineering skills on technical stuff. They're going to hand you gigantic amounts of data and say, make sense out of this. And if you're not a wizard at Excel and you can't use Tableau and BI and predictive analytics, you're not going to be able to make those decisions, but employers expect it. The good news is you can get an education and all this stuff like you are, but the job market and the premiums that companies pay and the advancement opportunities and the job security. So again, back to your original question, I discovered it. I stumbled across it. I think many students still today, they don't go to high school and know what supply chain management is. I mean, Denzel, when you were a sophomore in high school, did you say, I want to be a supply chain manager when I grow up?
absolutely not.
You probably couldn't have even have defined it. Then you go to college and you're like, okay, I want to be a business major. I'm competitive. I like to work in teams. I like the value proposition. I like products and services and where they come from. So you start leaning towards business, but then you say, okay, well, what in business do I want to major in? Man, like I said, it's probably the most well-rounded niche specialized degree there is out there. You got to be good at a bunch of different things. And the cool thing is a lot of the jobs out there are very specialized for entry level managerial roles. Like when you graduate from college, employers aren't saying, we want you to be able to do everything. No, you're 22, 23. We got jobs in supply chain management, but it's deep and strategic skill sets that you need, and they pay a premium for that. So I just like that short term, it sets you up for tons of opportunities that cater to your interests. But then longer term, the education and the work experience are so well rounded that you can take your career in whatever direction you want to take it into. And I feel like if you major in other business disciplines, like if you major in finance, that kind of locks you into maybe what your first job is and then long term as well. That maybe means that you're going to be a personal financial planner. That maybe means you work for the Merrill Lynch types. If you major in accounting, even sales, human resources management, that sets you up for, I think, very specific jobs and career paths. Where supply chain management, man, you could go off in all sorts of different directions based on what you're good at, what appeals to you. If you like negotiation, if you like the legal side, if you like the data analytics side, just all sorts of directions you can go out there into. So for me, it was like cool stuff, problem solving, but the job you're going to get in a year or two is going to be way cooler than the job I had 25 years ago. So I think that's a sign of the discipline, is that it's creating more strategic job opportunities that have greater advancement opportunities that command higher pay. That's a good sign. And that's definitely the trend line.
Yeah,
No, these answers, I'm like, you ask a question in 5 seconds and I spent 5 minutes answering it. So I
it's
think
great.
you guys like, okay.
Yeah, I think that ties really well into my second question, which is sort of, what skills do you see being really relevant in the job market, both now and in the future?
Uh, okay, moving forward, you have to develop a basket of a bunch of soft skills and hard skills. So the hard skills to me are the things that you're going to learn in the classroom. The soft skills are how you're going to execute on the hard skills, like time management, attention to detail, communication, ability to work well with others, problem solving, leadership, things of that nature. So the way I look at it is the skill sets keep broadening. Employers are going to be they're going to expect you to understand the legal issues associated with business, a little bit of accounting and finance. You have to be able to negotiate. You have to be able to handle large amounts of data. So what I try to tell students is you're majoring in something where demand exceeds supply. So that's great. Make sure that you keep developing your skill sets in a way where you can never be outsourced and or replaced by technology. So what does that mean? I think you're already majoring in something where demand exceeds supply. So just to make sure that you're always developing skill sets that lets you do your job better, faster, and cheaper. So I think the big one out there and a big concern for a lot of students is technology, artificial intelligence, machine learning. I think those can complement what you're majoring in and what you're going into, as long as you don't allow yourself to become a victim of the technology. At the end of the day, the technology is going to explode and accelerate at an extremely high speed, and you have to keep up with it. So with things like Industry 4.0 and Supply Chain Management 4.0, what's going to happen is companies are going to have access to data and information so fast in real time in such large amounts that isn't a threat to any of you that are majoring in supply chain management. It's an opportunity, as long as you know how to handle the large amounts of data coming at you at super high rates of speed in very large amounts. So what I tell students is, if you asked me what could I get really good at that would help me prosper and flourish kind of short term and midterm in my career, focus on the business data analytics side, the technology side of being able to use the technology in a way that lets you do things better, faster, and cheaper. In particular, being able to do things with gigantic amounts of data, data mining, programming and coding a little bit in like R and Python, Excel on steroids, where if someone gave you a spreadsheet with 12,000 lines of data and 27 columns, you could do things to that spreadsheet that helps you make a better sourcing decision, things like that. So I think the technology is going to potentially be a threat to you and your discipline and your career path unless you embrace the technology. What does that mean? It doesn't mean you have to be a software engineer or a computer science engineer. By no means does it mean that. It means you have to be a master of data and very large amounts of information. Back in my day, if you could use Excel to make better decisions, you were a data analytics wizard. Okay. Now that's not enough. Your manager is going to say, okay, you just made sense out of this data. I don't want to see your damn spreadsheet. Present this visually to me so I understand what you're trying to tell me. So now we have these tools like Power BI and Tableau. So these tools keep coming along that allow you to use technology in a way that helps you make better, faster decisions. So I think the technology part is actually something that could help you prosper and flourish. But if you don't embrace it, you could make you a victim. We have a business analytics minor in our program, and a significant number of students are choosing not to pick up that minor because they feel threatened. They're scared. They say that they're not tech savvy. To me, at the end of the day, that's just an excuse. The stuff is so well taught, and basically anyone can learn it. It's just a matter of the discipline and the time management to actually applying yourself and learning it. So I say, if you graduate with a supply chain management degree and you never embrace the technology and you're afraid of it, you don't learn it. And then 5, 6, 7 years down the road, if there's a recession or heaven forbid, there's another thing that looks like COVID and you're the victim of downsizing and you lose your job. Most of my students that are in their 20s that were victims of the pandemic and the recession were the ones that didn't embrace technology. The ones in my 30s that lost their jobs, and there weren't many. I would say the ones in my 20s didn't embrace technology. The ones in my 30s, the few that lost their jobs because companies had an excuse to get rid of them, were the ones that didn't get cross-functional work experience. Their internships were in procurement. They started off as buyers. They stayed in purchasing. They never left. They never interacted with other cross-functional areas or other parts of the company. And there's nothing wrong with getting really good at buying stuff, but then you hit a ceiling professionally. And then when you do that, you become less valuable to a company. And there's nothing wrong with being a senior buyer, a strategic buyer, a commodity manager, a director, an executive director that reports to a VP. I'm just saying, during your careers, embrace the technology and get as much cross-functional work experience as you can. Don't get locked into a specific area just because you're good at it, you enjoy it, and you get some early promotions early on. I've got former students in their 30s. They make 120, 150K a year with bonuses. They've never left purchasing and procurement, for example. Or I've got students that work on the logistics side or even the operations side. They're in operations and they're continuous improvement gurus, but they've never left the factory. They kind of stayed siloed and they need to broaden their horizons, get cross-functional work experience. So those are my recommendations. Is in your 20s, embrace the technology. And then in your 30s, make sure when you look at your resume that you got some good, decent cross-functional exposure. And if you can't get it at your employer, then maybe that's a red signal or an alarm to say, maybe I need to job hop a little bit. If I can't go beyond the factory at this company, then maybe I need to take on a different role at a different company to get that cross-functional work experience. In other words, job hop. And that's why I think when you graduate, most of our students are starting off in job rotations where the company says, we're going to make you get the cross-functional work experience and you're going to do it right away. So when you accept a job with us after graduation for the first 2 years, we're going to move you around every 6 months. That way, at the end of 2 years, you got 4 different work assignments. So you get it right off the bat because they know it's detrimental to both the employee and the employer if they're in their 30s and they've never worked outside of this window of procurement or logistics or operations.
Yeah, that really hits home, and I think that's where supply chain differentiates itself from some of the other majors, right? Because me starting in accounting, I kind of felt like I was on a path where I was going to be just working with numbers and making reports for other people to, do amazing things with. In supply chain, there's so many different, once you get put in that cross-functional situation, you have the tools to go and succeed.
I agree. What I like about supply chain management is if someone told me, this is my personality, this is what I'm good at, and this is what I really like to do, I know there's a place in supply chain management where you can prosper and flourish. If you told me I love numbers. I love crunching numbers. I like looking at data, and I prefer a job where I don't have tons of human interaction. I like to sit in a cubicle. There's a place for you in supply chain management. If you tell me that you like to put out fires and troubleshoot and do root cause analysis and solve problems, interact with people, there's continuous improvement and value stream mapping jobs in operations management, for example. So no matter what your psychological personal profile is and what your skills are and what you're good at, there's a place for you. You can find it. Uh, and again, I just feel like technology is always going to be a component of everything. So that's one of the things that you have to embrace. You can't say, well, I don't like it, so I'm not going to take it too seriously. The technology side is just that thing, I think, that too many people are balking at because it doesn't appeal to them. So we're really trying to create a culture within our program to just suck it up and do it, because if you do, no one regrets it later. It's one of those things where no one regrets doing it when it's all said and done. They have a business analytics minor. They're really good with the technology. And then longer term, people hate change. They hate rolling the dice. They hate taking risks. So when they get locked into a career path that's kind of smooth and consistent and there's not a lot of change and they kind of keep getting rewarded, what's the incentive to roll the dice and go off into a different part of the company or different part of supply chain management? And I've always said, if anytime you're avoiding something because you're afraid, both personally and professionally, that might mean you actually need to do it, right? And I think that applies professionally as well. Yep, I'm really good at working with suppliers and buying stuff for my company. And the downside there is no matter how good at you get at it, you could hit a ceiling professionally. And there's nothing wrong with that. I just hope that the economy continues to do well and the company that you work for is well enough where they're okay with that versus, when they have to cut back.
Okay, Nick, take it away. I know I've taken a lot of this already.
Well, when I'm in Tampa, you owe me a beer then. Congratulations. Full-time job? Internship. Where will it be? Okay. Yeah, I've noticed. Good for you. Congratulations. And I think probably with a remote internship, don't be. The cool thing about this whole remote experience is after this COVID thing is over in the very near future, remote's going to be a part of the work experience moving forward. Why? Because it works. It's cost effective, but it requires a different type of skill set that people weren't prepared for, and one that they're not used to, like time management, discipline, motivation. Uh, Remote work experiences tend to be very data driven, so it's interesting. I'm guessing that internship might be very, very data driven. Okay, so how are your data analytics skills? If someone dumps huge amounts of data on you, are you familiar with a lot of the technology that I mentioned previously? Yep. hmm So your potential is there that for your internship, they could give you a gigantic spreadsheet. You can make sense out of it, flip it, convert it into something into Power BI that makes use of like data visualization. And then they're like, what's this? It's Power BI. And then you've changed their corporate culture because now you got people embracing Power BI or Tableau, for example. So we've seen some of our students do that where employers, they haven't heard of Power BI or Tableau, and then students introduce it to them and they're like, wait a second, this has to be a part of our supply chain org moving forward, and we want you to champion that. And anytime you ask a 23-year-old to champion something, you're doing well professionally. So good for you, good for you. So you stumbled across a video that inspired you or something? Good for you. And it sounds like Denzel likewise thought he was going to be an accounting major at one point. I will say this, as you move forward through your careers, at some point, if you really want to climb up the corporate ladder, you have to be able to talk to the CFO of the organization. I think that's another ceiling that a lot of our students hit professionally. So one of the things I'm trying to say is when you go on, you graduate, you get your graduate degree, along your path, embrace the technology skills, get cross-functional work experience. If you can talk to the CFO in a way where the CFO really listens to what you have to say, you're going to do very, very well. So don't forget about your accounting background, because when you hear finance and you hear CFO, in corporate America, it's accounting. Okay. It's not personal, it's financial planning, finance, it's accounting stuff. So embrace that accounting stuff. And then moving forward, think about a graduate degree that embraces supply chain management, finance, or simply the ability to talk to the CFO, because that's where a lot of supply chain managers stumble. And that's why they put a lot of people in charge of supply chain management that aren't necessarily good at supply chain management, but they can talk to the CFO. And that's not the best match. The best match is folks like you and Denzel, one day rising up the corporate ladder, and you embrace that accounting background. And when you start talking to the CFO, it's a supply chain person that can talk to the CFO. Those are the ones that are going to flourish down the road here. So very cool. I'm glad I inspired you. But at the same time, you know what? You clicked that video and you kept watching and watching. You didn't like exit 5 seconds into it. Oh, this is a professor giving a lecture. Done. You stuck with it, and I think it's potentially inspired you in a way where I think you're going to look back on this. I feel like everything happens for a reason, and often that reason is that you stuck with it and you thought about it. The part of it too is it sounds like you started off in accounting and you just thought professionally, man, I can't make this my first job or even my long-term career path. So, and that's a good thing too. Half the battle is not necessarily finding what excites you; it's figuring out what doesn't excite you. But let it excite you enough where you keep going with that accounting thing during your supply chain career. It'll really benefit you. Mhm. Uh, the major reason I left the workforce and went to graduate school and pursued a career in academia, the major reason was demographically, the cards were stacked against me because I was a 20 something in the 1990s surrounded by baby boomers that were in their 30s and 40s. Okay. No matter what, experience matters. Obviously, a lot of other stuff matters, but it's hard to advance and go to someone that pays a premium for you or get promoted or climb up the corporate ladder where all of your competition has 10, 20 years work experience on you. And I was in the workforce that was predominated by the baby boomers. Now the baby boomers are leaving. The largest segment of our workforce, the most experienced, is walking away. You and Denzel are timing this perfectly. You're going into the workforce when the baby boomers are walking away. The threat is you're not going to have a lot of people in the workforce to tap into to draw upon enormous amounts of work experience. You're not going to be able to go to someone and learn from their 10, 20, 30, 40 years of work experience because they're going to be out of the workforce. However, the opportunity is I personally think you guys are going to time this where it's going to be the roaring 20s, 2020 and beyond, where you're going to have job opportunities and advancement opportunities and job hopping opportunities that demographically are so much in your favor that you're just going to be able to do things that I never could have dreamed of. So, again, everything happens for a reason. I'm glad that the demographics were stacked against me because I ended up in this job that I love, right? So there's my motivation, and that's how I reacted to it, and it worked out well for me. So the things that I saw, gosh, it was just a different world because back in my day, you got a great job with a company and you made the most of it and you tended to stick with that company. We don't live in that kind of culture anymore. And also, back in my day, it was still very tactical, and companies didn't do tons of outsourcing. They were highly vertically integrated. So supply chain management wasn't super strategic because companies did most things themselves still. The point I'm trying to make is you're going to be in a situation where Okay, everyone outsources, they outsource everything. It's strategic, demand exceeds supply. Companies are going to have to pay a premium to get you, to keep you. Demographically, everything's working to your favor. And if you don't get taken care of, if you're not satisfied, you can job hop, and you can usually job hop to a higher bidder. So the things I learned are that you're walking into a much different work environment. That once again, I don't see tons of downside downside to it. So life's all about timing. I think feel like you pick the right major and you're doing the right thing. If someone asked me today, if I was 18, where would I want to go to school and what would I want to major in, knowing what I know now, I kid you not. I kid you not. I would say I want to go to the University of South Florida in Tampa. I want to major in supply chain management, and I want to get a job in Florida after I graduate. Your best friend as a business major is a strong economy and a growing economy. Because if the economy is not growing, it's not creating jobs. And if it's not creating jobs, companies do not hire college grads. I will say what you're majoring in is fairly recessionary proof. During the Great Recession, my students didn't get 3 or 4 job offers when they graduated, but they got one, and you can only take one job. So that's good. So again, I think you guys, South Florida, Tampa, you're in a state that's growing. You're in a state where businesses are flocking to because apparently the cost of doing business there is less. There's no state income tax. If I was in your shoes, I would have said, I guess knowing what I know now, I want to go to school in Florida or Texas, and I want to get a job in one of those 2 states because it's just the economies are growing. I want to be someplace where the population is growing, where the economy is growing, because with that comes greater economic opportunity. And in your case, you live in paradise because you don't have winter and you have 8 months of perfect weather. And then in the summer, if it gets hot, you jump in the Gulf. So again, I kid you not, when Denzel contacted me, I was like, if I could do it all over again, South Florida, Tampa, supply chain management, and in the state of Florida, stay there because there's a state with tons of industry that's becoming a logistics hub for the US and global economy. And the manufacturing base keeps exploding, which means they're going to need supply chain talent. The only downside I've noticed with the Florida market is they tend to get a lot of transplants from like the Midwest, people that want to move down there, and they get them at a little bit of a discount because people want to live in paradise. And paradise is when it doesn't snow. So if you grew up in the Midwest, people take lesser paying jobs. So I see potentially if you stay in the state of Florida, you might be competing against people from out of state that might be willing to work for less because they're willing to work for less to live someplace where there's no winter. I've had students take jobs down in Florida, and I've been surprised at how they were just slightly on the low side. And I see industry saying we can get people at a discount. So why wouldn't they? But what you get in return, though, at the same time is no state income tax. So you make some of that money back that way. And again, you grow up in a place like Michigan where it's gray and there's no sunshine for 5 months and you're battling winter. Those are easy concessions to make. So Nick, give me some more questions. I talk so much when you ask a question. Throw some more questions at me. Okay. Do you want to stay in Florida after you graduate? Okay, so you're more about uh, job opportunity. Just go like gravitate towards the better one that's just the best fit for you type thing. Okay, yeah. The other advice that I would give you guys is when you take your first job assignment after graduation, pay attention to what your resume will look like 3 to 5 years after you start working there. Okay. What I've noticed is if you take a job with the company because it's the highest paying offer, or if you take a job with a company because you want to be as close to your family as possible, those are great reasons to take a job. But if all you do for 3 to 5 years is buy rolled steel and sit in a cubicle, you say, well, yeah, but I buy $500 million worth of rolled steel for this appliance manufacturer every year. 500 million, big number. But at some point, you're not going to be learning much. You're not going to be growing professionally because you're just buying rolled steel. A few weeks into the job, it's just going to be really routine. It's going to be very tactical. It's not going to be strategic. So gravitate towards the companies and the job opportunities where you say, after 3 to 5 years, where will my resume look the best? Because it's that next step, 3 to 5 years after you graduate, that's either a huge step professionally or not so much. And that's going to depend on how much you learn and the quality of work that you get straight out of school. That's why I like companies that make offers with job rotations, because for the first 2 years, you might have 4 different job assignments. And they put you in full-time roles where they say you need deliverables and results. You're not here to uh, job shadow someone per se. Like, we're going to put you actually in a full-time role for 6 months and we expect you to deliver. We want to see results. They assign a mentor to you, usually like a director, executive director, VP type. So you develop a network in 2 years that would have taken me 3 decades in the auto industry back in my day, because they didn't do this kind of stuff. So good for you. Gravitate towards where the best opportunities are. But at the same time, the money matters. You're not going to take a job for 37K a year and turn something down for 77K a year, even if it's buying rolled steel, because that's stupid, right? That's $40,000 difference. But that's why that kind of stuff doesn't happen. You have to pay attention less, I think, just because the job opportunities are that good and companies kind of know what they're doing, especially the higher profile ones, the ones you've heard of. Mhm.
Yeah, so I was looking at your profile a little bit, checking up on you. No, but and I
I
and
did
I
the same
saw
to you.
that
I
you
did the same. Like, who's this Denzel guy?
and I saw that you did some work with sustainable manufacturing, and that's sustainability is a big part of our college as well. I was just wondering if you could talk a bit about the importance of sustainability in supply chain and sort of maybe the future of that as well.
Yeah, the thing is, if you think about it, let's take the auto industry as an example. They outsource everything. They expect their suppliers to do everything. And all the auto companies, they outsource to all of the same suppliers. So, like, what's the competitive advantage and differentiator? Whoever manages their suppliers the best will be the ones that most competitively price their products and have the widest margins and are the most successful. So the way I look at it is, for any major strategic initiative that a company has, like if a company says, we want to be greener, we want to be more socially conscious, we want to be more environmentally friendly. Well, where does most of the environmental impact happen for a company? It's in their supply chain, right? So for almost any major strategic initiative out there, it's supply chain that can lead the way, because that's where most of the impact is at. Back in my day, we didn't even take a class in sustainability. We didn't even understand what green meant. We didn't know what it meant to be environmentally friendly. You're now a part of that generation where the expectation is that if you buy a product or service from an organization, you expect them to take all of this stuff very, very seriously. So are they taking it very, very seriously? I think it's a mixed bag. I think you owe it to yourself to be well versed in this area, to understand the issues, the frameworks, the different types of certification. Uh, in our business college, every student in the business college has to take a sustainability course, but that's kind of recent. That's only been in the books for about 3 years now. So we've only been at this 3 years where every business major has to take a sustainability course. Now we're trying to introduce sustainability issues into every class we teach, because there are sustainability issues in every part of supply chain management. So if you teach a purchasing class, what are the sustainability issues? If you teach an operations class, what are the sustainability issues? So we've come a long way very, very quickly. So I say, embrace this stuff. It's not going away. And then also, a quick way to figure out if this is important to you and you want to work for a company that takes this stuff very seriously, I've always said, identify the functional area that's important to you and look at the most important person in that area in the org chart. If they don't have a VP in front of their name and report to the CEO, the company's probably not taking it too seriously. Right now, most companies do not have a vice president of sustainability. Okay. And they don't have that person report directly to the CEO. They're usually buried a few levels into the org chart where they report to someone who reports to someone who reports to the CEO. So we're still in the early stages of this. So if it's important to you, look at the org chart. And that's my other recommendation, is when you interview with the company, look at the org chart, look at the person, the most important one in the functional area within which you would be working in. And if they don't have a VP in front of their name and they're not talking to the CEO on a daily basis, you're taking a job in a part of the company that they're probably not taking too seriously, too strategically. Fortunately, I'm guessing if you're majoring in supply chain management, you're probably going to be interviewing with companies where the most important person in that functional area has a VP in front of their name, and they're probably talking daily to the CEO. So that's a good sign. So on sustainability, we're just getting started. If that's important to you, and it is for a lot of people, it's kind of like diversity, inclusion, all that stuff. It's like whatever a company says is important to them, like diversity. Well, how can we impact our diversity goals the greatest in the supply chain? As a place, sustainability. So it's because so much of the is outsourced, and they have their suppliers do so much. If you came along and said, we're going to put batteries in our product, and most of the precious metals and batteries come from mines in Africa, and most of those mines are labored by children. Well, if you want to do something about slave labor, your supply chain is probably the best place to get started, because that's where most of the impact is. So the cool thing is you're majoring in something where if a company says something's important to us, like child labor in Africa, or diversity goals and issues, or sustainability, supply chain is probably that part of the company that can have the greatest impact on whatever that strategic initiative is. But you nailed it. Sustainability is probably the one that has the most legs right now, where it's been around for a few years, and it's probably only going to get more and more important. For some of this other stuff, we'll see how long it lasts. Things come and go, so we'll see. I got time for more if you guys have it and are interested.
Yeah, I definitely have a few more,
Okay.
but if you want to jump in, Nick. Okay, we went to a supply chain summit recently, and I was shocked to hear one of the executives say that because of what happened with COVID, they're now holding 18 months of safety stock. So I'm along the line of that. I'm sort of curious, how has COVID changed your view of various supply chains, and again, how do you think it will change the future?
Okay. Well, okay. In general, would you agree that supply chain management has done a pretty good job? It's been pretty resilient.
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, we ran out of toilet paper for a while. Outside of that, can we really complain too much about what we ran out of? Yeah, they're shutting down car and truck plants because they don't have computer chips for their cars and trucks. Because in the auto industry, what happened was when COVID hit, no one wanted to buy cars and trucks. Demand crashed. Okay. And then after a little bit of time, car and truck sales soared through the roof. But then during that time period, the auto industry did nothing to build up an inventory of computer chips, because they never saw demand coming back that strong that fast. So they guessed wrong on everything. In the meantime, there was a surge in demand day one when COVID started for a bunch of things that required computer chips, like video game consoles and exercise equipment and things like that. Then America realized, you know what, we don't have any factories that actually make computer chips. So I think what the problem right now is demand is surging. The American economy is going to grow like 6% this year. I mean, amongst the industrialized world, the US economy is probably going to go at twice the rate of other countries. The government just pumped $6 trillion of money into our economy, and there's money out there sitting around that people are going to spend. So demand is skyrocketing. Supply lines are a little tight because of COVID and because the supply chain is global. So imagine supply lines are a little tight. Demand is through the roof. That's going to raise inflationary pressure. Prices are going to go up. So yeah, I mean, supply chain management got the job done in 2020. People got what they needed. Yeah, maybe they waited an extra day, 2 days, 3 days, 3 weeks, but eventually they got their toilet paper. This year, the issue is going to be keeping up with demand, and supply chain management is by definition resilient. So I think what happened was there was a lack of risk management, and there was a lack of proactive visibility in the supply chain. So let's say you're Ford, and you didn't realize that there was someone in your supply chain that was buying something from a single source, and the supplier was in China. So when COVID hit China first, 3 weeks later, Ford was running out of some part that some supplier was using from some supplier to make some sort of part that eventually went in a Ford car or truck. My point is, I think risk management and being more proactive and having greater visibility of your entire supply chain is front and center finally. They said that they did that in the 2008 recession, even in the auto industry, when car and truck sales fell 50%, when the banking system almost collapsed. What we realized was they said they were going to do it, but they never really followed through because the Great Recession wasn't as severe as the pandemic and kind of didn't even really last that long. This is a little different. COVID was pretty serious. It was global and it lasted kind of a long time. We're over a year into this. So I think risk management and visibility of your supply chain, I think what's going to happen is companies are going to say, let's look at our entire supply chain. Let's ask questions like, is there slave labor associated with anything in our supply chain? Let's figure out if that's the case. Most companies, they have no idea. They think they know, but they don't know, and that's not good enough anymore. Likewise, if there's something in your supply chain that only one supplier is making, and if it's in some place like China, ask a question like, why? Could it be made in America? Could it be made by multiple sources? I've seen data that basically says a major reason some supply chains broke down in 2020 was because they realized something in their supply chain only had one supplier, and that one supplier is in China. And then they asked, well, why is that? And why didn't we know about that? Well, the major reason is that it was cheaper in China, so someone made a decision based on cost issues. And you might think that, well, something proprietary, something sophisticated. The data shows that most of the stuff in the supply chains across the industry that was single sourced in China wasn't really sophisticated stuff. It was just because it was cheaper, and it wasn't that much cheaper. How expensive is it to hold 18-month supply of something versus picking a slightly more expensive supplier in Indiana versus in China? So the answer to your question is, I think risk management, being proactive and looking at all of the details in your supply chain from beginning to end and getting visibility and greater visibility beyond your first tiers and second tiers is front and center. So when you guys take jobs with companies, there might be an actual group called risk management, for example, where it's actually a department, a functional area with people working in it, saying what's the next black swan event that could do what happened in 2020 to us, but be more prepared for it. Like, yeah, we got a supplier in China and that doesn't need to be made there. And if we still use that supplier, maybe we should have a dual source, maybe one in the United States. And you'll see a little more regional manufacturing reshoring back to the United States. Maybe not to the extent that everyone said, oh, manufacturing is coming back to America. A little bit will. Some might get diverted away from China, but at the end of the day, I think all that's going to be done is greater visibility and identify the weakest links in the supply chain. COVID taught us that companies had absolutely no idea what the weakest links were.
Yeah, go ahead. That's definitely something that we've heard a lot. This sort of idea that we just sort of source things in China because they were cheaper, and now we're looking at can we source them? Can we near source? Can we go to another sort of developing nation? It's something we've heard a lot. A question that's
we actually have data that says, let's say you have two options: supplier in Indiana or supplier in China. Supplier in Indiana says dollar per part. Supplier in China says 70 cents per part. Now, if you're buying $1 billion worth of this part, that's a huge cost savings to source it in China, right? The data indicates that if the supplier in China isn't at least 30, 40, 50, 60% cheaper than the American supplier, long term, when you add up all the costs, total cost of ownership, they're actually going to be more expensive. So that's one of the great things about COVID is they're actually looking at the data, trying to figure out, well, if we go with a cheaper supplier outside of the United States, how much cheaper does it really, really, really have to be where it's actually cheaper? Okay, so yeah, so we're learning a lot, and that's the key is supply chain management learns from its mistakes. So that'll be kind of like the greatest benefit of all of this is we're going to re-examine the way we used to do things, and the end result is we'll get better at it. So if something like this happened again, but at the same time, don't get me wrong, we're not terrible at what we do, because again, I asked you guys the questions like, do you think it was resilient? Like, did we in general get what we want? I ordered stuff all the time, and yeah, maybe I had to wait a few hours longer. Maybe that toilet paper wasn't there when I wanted it in March of 2020, but by golly, in April it was there. So I was okay. I survived 2 weeks with the stash that I had. So we're really good at what we do, but I think we we made some decisions that were too short term in consideration. We got a little greedy and we didn't look at all the data and we didn't think long term. I think that's going to change. That part of it will change.
Yeah, on the sort of visibility part of that, something that I'm reading a lot is about, the intellectual property theft and, how companies, their assets are increasingly intangible. And so I'm sort of wondering, how do you think that balances with the sort of visibility thing? Do you think companies will be willing to do that, considering those risks?
Well, I think that that's going to be a part of the process. So companies are going to know what their entire supply chain looks like, and they're going to want to know it in detail. These things are going to start to surface. Are there conflict minerals in our product? Is there slave labor in our product? Are we buying stuff in parts of the world that destroy the environment? Is there someone in our supply chain that's totally disregarding IP, trademark laws, and things like that? So I think that greatness will come from this COVID experience. And one of those things will be we will identify a number of issues about a lot of different topic areas as we dig deep. Yeah, after the 2008 recession in the auto industry, the only visibility they wanted after that is, hey, if our car and truck sales fall 50% overnight like they did, who in our supply chain goes out of business? So they went back and looked at the financials of their suppliers and then their suppliers and their suppliers. And that's all they did. They just said, I want to look at your financials so that if another great recession happens, are we going to lose suppliers in our supply chain? So they didn't ask questions like, is it single sourced? Are you obeying IP laws? Is there child labor in your product? Are there conflict minerals? Things like that. So, and I think it's going to be your generation that's going to embrace, like, well, let's look at all of these issues, not just the ones that impacted us when this bad thing happened. So you bring up another good point too, is a lethal combination is a supply chain professional with supply chain work experience and a supply chain undergraduate degree that goes on to get a law degree. Can you imagine all of the intellectual property issues and legal issues and patent law and things like that? I've only had a few students over the years go on to get their law degree. What I'm trying to say is, when you can get a graduate degree in something that complements what you're majoring in, and there aren't a lot of people in the field with that skill set, man, your market value really shoots up. There's an appetite for supply chain organizations to have lawyers in their supply chain orgs that are in essence supply chain professionals, but have law degrees on these issues that you just brought up, like IP, trademarks, royalties, infringement laws, World Trade Organization, these rules that tend to protect design secrets and things like that. So that's another avenue you can take, is if you like the legal side of the business law classes that you took, man, a Juris Doctorate, a JD combined with this field that you're going into, lethal combination.
Yeah, that's fascinating. I certainly never thought of that. But I do like the legal side of even what I'm working with now. Sort of I honestly, I was surprised. Right now I'm in sourcing, and I was surprised at sort of how much legal knowledge is required. It's not something I really thought about in my education.
Yeah, most organizations have legal experts deal with the legal issues in supply chain management. The problem is most of those legal experts don't even know what supply chain management is, right? So they have a hard time even talking to supply chain professionals. So you have these contracts and purchase orders with these terms and conditions with your suppliers. And yeah, these are like very sophisticated legal terms and conditions and those boilerplates. And most people in supply chain management don't even know the details of those things. And they're negotiating these terms and conditions, if you will. So anything you can do to round out your legal skills and take it to like a subject matter expert level, like get a law degree, man. But at the same time, if you didn't do that, you'd be okay. You have to enjoy what you're doing. So, don't go get a law degree if you don't want to be a lawyer, or if you don't enjoy those legal issues. If a student asked me today, okay, I'm a supply chain professional, what else do I need to become to be as successful as possible? I wouldn't say you need a Juris Doctorate. I just think that would be a lethal combination because there are so few people out there with that combination. At the end of the day, I say be a supply chain professional that evolves into a data scientist. In other words, can you manage enormous amounts of information and data in a way that helps you make better decisions? That to me is the thing that will help you thrive in your 20s as you become more successful. More so than, yep, I'm really good at the legal issues in supply chain management. I wouldn't say that like just all of a sudden makes you exponentially more successful. What would serve you better is just becoming a data scientist along with being a supply chain professional. Yep. Yeah, you nailed it. Industry keeps telling us that demand exceeds supply, that we're not cranking out enough of you folks, right? And one of the problems is, as you mentioned, as people go through high school, as they identify themselves as being college bound, they've never heard of supply chain management. That's starting to change a little bit. I mean, if you're in high school and you turned on the news over the last year, supply chain management is on TV now, right? But how many 16-year-olds are turning on Fox Business News or CNBC, even during COVID, right? They're gaming and playing video games and who knows what they're doing. So, point well taken. I think, first of all, if you like little kids, you go to college to be a school teacher, right? If you like helping people on the lower ends of the socioeconomic ladder, maybe you go into social work. If you like to do things with your hands and build things and you like designs, maybe you become an engineer. The point I'm trying to make is you're right. I think high schoolers and young college students, they decide, I want to be a business major. I'm competitive, but I like to work in teams. I like to be rewarded. I don't want any limits on my earning income and potential. If you become a school teacher, you're not going to double your salary every 3 to 5 years. You're not going to get promoted every 7 years. When you're a business major, you can say things like, I want to double my salary every 3 to 5 years. I want to climb up the corporate ladder. I want advancement opportunities. I want to be able to job hop. I want to be able to move around the country, go into different industries. So I think we're fine as far as high schoolers understand what business is. The right types of high schoolers and young college students, they gravitate towards business, but then they stumble across supply chain management best case, right? They hear perfect job placement, high starting salaries, advancement opportunities. So they kind of go into it kind of for all the wrong reasons. Not that those are bad reasons. Like I want a job and I want to make as much money as possible and I want to advance and get promoted and job hop to the highest bidder. When people in high school and early young college students hear about accounting and finance and marketing and advertising and these other majors like general management or general marketing, they immediately right away understand what that stuff is. It resonates with them. Supply chain management doesn't resonate with them. They don't understand what it is. And that's one of the reasons that there is a shortage of people like you majoring in this stuff. So back to your question, I think we all need to do our part. You're students in this field. You're going to go into the field as professionals. The reason I do what I do is I want to get the word out. I want to get the word out to high schoolers, to young college students. Me personally, I think every business major, if business is a good match for you, I think every business major should major in supply chain management because it's so well-rounded. It makes you a jack of all trades, right? It makes you good at a bunch of different things. And then what I think we should do in academia is tell all business majors, all of you have to major in supply chain management. And then if you don't want to get a job in supply chain management, you pick a track like accounting finance, marketing, human resources management. So you pick a track because you want to get jobs in those fields after you graduate, but because of your supply chain degree, you're well-rounded. You can negotiate, you understand the legal issues, you have strong data analytics skills. Negotiation, data analytics, uh, problem solving, skills typically associated with supply chain management. Is there a job in any industry at any organization where they say, yeah, you can suck at negotiation? Think of a job where you don't have to negotiate. Oh yeah, you can suck at problem solving. Oh, you can be terrible at managing large amounts of data. If you go into accounting, finance, marketing, advertising, promotion, human resources management, you still need those hard skills and soft skills typically associated with supply chain management. So I think we need to do a better job of saying, man, supply chain management isn't this niche area where you only learn how to buy stuff or move stuff around or make stuff. No, it's supply chain management is a combination of all the soft skills and hard skills that all employers and all organizations need in the global economy. And if people understood that, then they'd say, well, yeah, that's what I should be majoring in. But then as academics, we also need to create opportunities for students. What if they don't want to work in supply chain management after they graduate? The cool thing about majoring in supply chain management is, yeah, you do go into this part of the organization, supply chain management, but they pay a premium for you. And you can go into different parts and they pay a premium for these strategic skill sets that are broad in depth. So it's not pigeonholing yourself, even though you're starting in that part of the company. And in most industries, it's really what they compete on. For me, any company that designs and builds stuff, they all outsource everything to the same suppliers. It's their competitive advantage comes from who manages their suppliers the best. What company doesn't want to do things better, faster, and cheaper? So yeah, you nailed it. You nailed it. We got to talk to the high schoolers. We got to get the word out. We need students like you doing what you're doing. Explain to them that if you major in this, okay, I think you would agree that you're not going to tell someone who wants to be a school teacher or a social worker, you really should major in supply chain management, right? But we would agree that if business is a good match for you, then you got to be wired a certain way if you want to be a business major. If you hate money, you hate promotions, you hate making good money, you hate the fact that companies design and build things and provide. If you hate capitalism and the free market, if you hate it, I would probably say don't be a business major. But if you're okay with all of that stuff and business is a good match for you, that's where guys like you step in and I step in and say, give the supply chain thing a serious look. If someone says, well, I don't want to go into supply chain management after I graduate, you might say, well, that still doesn't mean you shouldn't major in it. Or help them understand, well, what does a supply chain management job after graduation look like? It's a job that requires that you be good at a bunch of different things. And that's the kind of stuff that doesn't get outsourced, that doesn't get replaced by technology. And that's going to be the greatest threat, I think, to your generation moving forward is you got to major in something where it can't get outsourced and it can't be replaced by technology. And that means you have to be pretty damn good at a bunch of different things. I don't see any other major delivering on that more so than what you guys are majoring on.
Yeah, I think that really resonates because we've been trying to give some pitches around business college on supply chain, and I honestly think people just don't believe us when we're saying some of these things like this is your starting salary, opportunities, internships, and people are just kind of like, yeah, because they're in one of these big blanket majors and internships are like incredibly scarce.
Yep. It is the year of COVID. The internship opportunities, employment opportunities in general aren't as plentiful. If they do come along, they tend to be remote. So it's a tough time to take a program and take it to the next level in terms of recognition and brand and attract students to it. We were fortunate at our program that pre-COVID, we kind of place where students on campus knew about it. It was nationally ranked. We had great relationships with some high profile companies. So we weathered the COVID storm, if you will. But like I said, this COVID thing, all indications are that it's a V-shaped recovery. And the supply chain thing is going to still be on the news because supply chain management is going to keep us on this trajectory of the V-shaped recovery because they're going to have to open up supply lines, keep prices down as demand surges, and they will. So, I think, like I said, if I was 18 again, I'd be in Tampa at the University of South Florida, majoring in what you guys are majoring in. I spent some time on your website. I think it's thin. I think it needs more information. It needs more data, more numbers, more infographics. Even the brochure that you have attached to the website for your major is thin on information. I think you guys need a dedicated like marketing staff. Maybe the students can take ownership of that. Where if a high schooler or young college student went to your website, it would answer all of their questions in a way where they end up saying, I got to go to the University of South Florida and I got to major in supply chain management. I don't think your PR stuff does that right now. That's my kind of my recommendation is don't take for granted the clicks in the internet and what your web pages look like. I just thought it was thin and sparse on information.
No, yeah, that's great feedback, and we'll definitely try to pass it along where we can. That's definitely something, because right now I'm sort of the membership chair, but I definitely see Nick as the person who's going to replace me as I'm going to graduate soon. But that's going to be something that's big for us, high school outreach. How can we get high schoolers thinking about the major early? And so, that's definitely something for you to think about, Nick.
Yeah, you guys could be walking into the high schools and just pitching it and talking about it, and you're young enough where they would think you're cool versus me walking in and listening to the professor. You guys could probably like do a better job than I could of selling it. So that's always an option. You're in a big metro area, so there's a lot of talent there to tap into. Local chapter meetings of APICS, the Association of Supply Chain Management, Institute of Supply Management, actually reaching out to people in the area on LinkedIn and connecting with industries and things like that. So I think I look at the University of South Florida, and I think it's a rising star in the supply chain management realm, if you will. It's like you guys keep doing what you're doing, given again that you're in a part of the country that people want to be in, and it's an economy that's growing like crazy. Nothing but upside there. You just gotta basically run with it. I live in a state that's flatlined, that's shrinking, where there are fewer and fewer high school graduates each year because people are moving to places like Texas and Florida. So you're actually our competition, and you're the reason that we're not growing. But that's okay. Competition's a good thing. So I think for me to keep up with what we've been doing is going to be harder than the University of South Florida to take its program to the next level, if that makes sense. All you got to do is ride this growth, and I think you guys are doing all the right things. I think, man, get that website flashier, talk to the high schoolers, connect with industry professionals, go to local chapter meetings of organizations related to supply chain management. I think the next step potentially for your program is identify a faculty member that can champion, hey, let's get our program on the map in terms of rankings. Let's pitch it. Let's sell it. Let's talk to these organizations that rank programs, and let's get some testimonials from local industry like the medical device industry in the St. Pete, Tampa Bay area, and VPs of supply chain management coming out and saying, hey, we hire these grads and they're phenomenal. Things like that on your website. Gartner ranks schools, getting a faculty to champion that application process and say, look, I look at your website, it's like you guys must be on the verge of completing that application and being a contender for being nationally ranked. What if the University of South Florida in 2 years is like top 25 or honorable mention? That's how it all got started with us. So the cool thing is, again, you're riding the growth curve of a state that's got nothing but upside. It's like all you got to do is jump on that curve and ride, and you can take it to wherever you want. The best thing you can do is when you graduate and you work for someone, do a great job where they say, hey, are there more of you at USF? And you're like, yeah, there's a bunch of me. And then they come and recruit from there. Most of our companies that recruit from our program, they used to only go to Big Ten schools, and they usually only go to Big Ten schools like Michigan State and Indiana and the University of Michigan. What happened was our student got into one of the companies, and someone at that company said, hey, are there more students like that at your school that we could be tapping into? So your classmates and students that have graduated from the program become your program's best marketing tool. So you have to create a culture where students say, yeah, I'm gonna go work for a company, and my goal is that they hire more students from our program. You become an ambassador. So you go back to USF for career fairs and represent your company at a very young age. Most of the managers that come to our career fairs are alumni that are in their 20s representing their employers with job opportunities, because they're loyal alumni. So you got to create a culture where people are emotionally attached to not the football team, but to the program that they graduated from. And I don't know where you guys are at culturally. Do the students there feel emotionally attached to their major and program?
I would say so. Even at the company I'm at now, there's a few former USF grads, and they're right there. They're like, how are you doing? Can I help you with this? I think it's probably a matter of just growing that, and getting bigger, getting more people in these companies. And as you say, I would speculate that we're on the verge of that, getting enough people that it's beginning to become visible.
How many students do you have in your major right now? Ballpark.
Not sure off the top of my head. I think we're somewhere between
Over
30
100?
and, no, somewhere between like 30 and 40.
Okay,
But
yeah,
uh,
still a small program. So,
uh,
yeah, a lot of legwork, I think, of letting people on campus know, letting people in the business college know about this incredible major, uh, letting high schoolers know, especially in the local market, if you will. So yeah, you still need to get the word out. So it sounds like you need to do a little more advertising in promotion, and I think also don't take for granted. We have a program of around 300 majors, and in general, after their sophomore year, they start doing things together. They go to parties together. They go to the bar together. They go to the bowling alley together. They do social events together. Uh, they become a social clique. They interact socially, and eventually, their best friends are students in their major. Then they graduate and they stay in touch. So that's how you develop that culture and give back. Where all of a sudden, the reason we have a nationally ranked program with 300 students is because of our alumni. They graduated, they stayed in touch with each other because they were friends and they felt emotionally attached to the major, the supply chain program. If you ask me what's the biggest reason for your program's success, national ranking, etc., it's the culture and it's the alumni. Okay, so if you cultivate that, the students graduate and they're loyal and they come back and they hire more bulls. You guys are the bulls, right?
yeah,
Okay,
yeah, sorry, I was
they
muted.
hire more bulls. They have an emotional attachment, like fiercely loyal. Man, you're going to take that program to the next level, and you're going to be able to say down the road, I had a lot to do with that, and that's something you can take pride in. Like, let's say 2 years from now, it has 170 students, and tons of companies want more supply chain managers from the University of South Florida or students. Man, to be able to say that you had something to do with that, or during a job interview, if they ask you like extracurricular, situational, star interview technique stuff, and you say, some of the things you're trying to do is build a culture within the supply chain program. They're going to say, wait a second, change management culture. That's what companies are doing right now. They're trying to change their cultures. It's called change management. If you describe to them what you're trying to do as an undergrad, think, wait a second, if we hire this guy at our company, he's going to be an agent of change and a force for change at our company in a very positive way. So these are all things that you could sell during job interviews. And you might be doing these things, not even realize that you're doing them.
Yeah, for sure. When you describe it like that, it sounds amazing and like something I should talk about more.
Hey, you called a professor up from another school and spent over an hour with him on Teams. Most people don't do that. Okay. It's borderline not normal, but in a good way.
Okay.
You're taking the initiative. And yeah, most students, they think that every interview question has to be answered based on a professional work experience and an internship related to what they're majoring in. Not really. Maybe half the questions are answered through stuff that you're doing right now, because this is tapping into how are you wired and what will your professional behavior be like if they hire you. This is all stuff that employers are like going to eat up, that they can't tap into with most students, because most students either haven't done it or they don't know that doing stuff like this is exactly what employers are looking for. I mean, you're trying to be an agent of change the culture, and that's exactly what a lot of companies are struggling with, because these companies have been around for decades and change doesn't come easily. And their culture isn't as strong as it needs to be to be successful in a changing market and global economy. So you're saying Hollywood needs to make a movie called How Supply Chain Management Saved the World During COVID. But it ain't happening. It ain't happening. It's just not that exciting. Like we identified a single source of supply in China that tightened our supply chain. We created a dual source and we moved a supplier to America. It's just not as exciting as the Wolf guy on Wall Street because there won't be any dirty scenes. It's like it just won't be as fun to watch. But literally, supply chain management saved the world during COVID. Literally, the Pfizer vaccine. Do you guys know how many days it took to design it?
I do not.
2 days. 2
Wow.
days. It wasn't even a design issue. It's supply chain management. It's making it, regulatory requirements, distribution. And I just want to throw out there, I teach at a school in Kalamazoo, Michigan. Pfizer's largest factory is in Kalamazoo, Michigan. And my students are the ones distributing the Pfizer vaccine to America and the world, students that major in supply chain management, because it wasn't a design issue. The virus isn't that complicated. It's getting through the legal affairs, the regulatory requirements, and actually making it and distributing it. And my students, when they first started distributing the vaccine, they said we could do 1 billion doses a year. Okay, 1 billion, that's good, but there's 8 billion people on the planet. A few months later, they're so good at supply chain management, better, faster, cheaper, they've changed the number to 2 billion. And rumor is it's going to be 3 billion in less than a year. So it went from less than 1 billion to 2 billion to potentially 3 billion. That supply chain management, it's saving the world. You're right. We're never going to see a movie. It's not that exciting to most people out there, but it really is cool stuff. And yeah, it's an honor to meet you guys. Thank you for the opportunity. Feel free to reach out to me anytime if you want to do this again, or if you want me to put you in touch with someone that could offer more insights and different insights, feel free. No, I vacation in Florida, and I'll plan on stopping in Tampa, and if I do, we will meet up. How's that sound?
Yeah, that sounds great to me.
I'll make sure I do it in February when there's 12 inches of snow here, if that's okay.
Perfect.
Yeah, you won't see me down there in August, but man, in the dead of winter, that sounds like a road trip.
We won't even call you a snowbird.
Oh yeah, you guys have all sorts of names for people like us, but we don't care.
Well, Nick, do you have anything else? I think I've gotten more.
Yeah. Thank you. Well, and likewise, I've seen a lot of traits and characteristics in you too, for example, that are going to carry you guys a long way. Just the ability to identify opportunities like this and say the stuff that you guys have said, like thank you. We could talk more and more, but a major void with most leaders is they really suck at saying thank you, good job, and I'm sorry. Just think thank you, good job, and I'm sorry. And a major part of leadership training is learn to just say those three things and listen very well. You've let me talk a lot. You've been great listeners, and you've said very nice things like thank you. Whatever it is that the school's doing, that your parents have done, whatever you're doing to yourselves, man, stay on track. And as you approach graduation, reach out to me if you're not finding what is a good fit for you. I think I've learned enough from both of you where I wouldn't hesitate in helping you seeking out what might be the best fit for you guys. So if you struggle in any of that, man, just reach out and we'll see if I can help you get to where you want to be after you graduate.
Yeah, I really appreciate it.
Okay, guys, I hear the 6-year-old and the 4-year-old downstairs. That means my wife has brought them back inside. So I got to let you go. So even if you wanted to keep talking, it's over, man.
Okay. All right, Sime, enjoy.
Okay. Okay. Bye, guys.